Okay, so that's one thing I want to do. I want to draw a grid, and I want to draw something on top of this grid. So we're going to have a new function, and this is going to be called trail. And in this function, let's do this after here. Try and keep our program looking remotely tidy. So your functions, the actual contents of the functions, in a simple program like this, it makes it easier to read if they follow the same flow as they do in the main program. So grid happens first, so that's the first thing I'd expect to find down here. Random triangles associated with that, so it's underneath. Trail happens after grid, and things associated with it, so it's going to happen all the way down here. So what I want to do in here is I don't want a stroke. Just make sure we're not using a stroke. It's always a good idea when you're working with functions to set up the situation as you want it before and after. So we talked about this analogy of the pen in the lectures. You want to imagine that we're making sure we know exactly what pen, whether we've got a stroke, whether we've not got a stroke, what the fill colour is going to be before we do any drawing, to make sure the results that we see are what we'd expect. So I don't want a stroke and I want a fill colour. I'm going to make use of opacity here, so I'm going to have a kind of greeny bluey colour of 100, 100, and I want this to not be very opaque, because I'm going to paint many objects on top of each other to get a kind of texture effect. So I want to do something in a loop. What I'm going to do is I'm going to render a small ellipse. I'm going to move this as a trail from the left to the right hand side of the screen. And I am going to do this lots of times so that with the opacity they'll kind of blend together into a nice texture. Goes 0, I'm going to just use a counter called I this time, and I'm going to do I less than width in the first instance, I plus plus. So we're stepping on just one pixel at a time in this loop. And what I want to do is I want to draw an ellipse. I'm going to manage a x and y variable as well, actually, so let's put them in. Int x equals 0, int y equal to, what have we set the width? 300, so this is going to be in the middle. So x, y, and let's have a bit of randomness here. Well, no, let's not start with. Okay, so just now nothing's going to change. We're going to get the same x drawn there. So let's increment this x variable. Don't have anything. Okay. So what I've done here is I've not declared this variable I. I've not told it what kind of box it's going to be in, what kind of drawer it's going to be in. If that works now. I've got x, y. Oops. Typo here in ellipse. See it turning orange. Some confidence that it's the right colour, the right function. Okay, so we can see a green, kind of faint green flare across the middle. So what I want to do is I want to play with this y value. I want this to happen lots, and I want to play with this. So the y value, every time that I've done that, every time I've gone across once, because I'm going to do this for 400 times the width, 400 traces are going to go across there, and I want to play with them all. But I don't want to, if I didn't do anything to x, x would get up to 400 and it would keep on being incremented and it'd be drawing off the side of the page. So in here I want to say if x is equal to width plus 1, because I want to make sure I'm going to the very extremity of the page. X is equal to 0, and I also want to reset y. I want to make y equal to height over 2. So now we need to perturb y a little bit. The way we're going to do this is by doing a plus equals and use random again here. Let's play with 10 just now. So we're going to modify, increment y by 0 to a value between 0 and 9 and see what that does. It'll take a little while to load up when you're doing programs like this because it's got to do quite a lot on the startup function before it renders anything. Okay, so these are all moving pretty quickly down the way. So that's not what we want. We want this here to be kind of flowing across the screen. So let's see what we can do. So this is only moving us in one direction. Y can be incremented by 10, but by 10 pixels in one direction. So it's going to pretty quickly increase in that straight line we saw. So one way around this is if we change this slightly, so we get a value between 0 and 10, because the upper bound is exclusive, remember, and we subtract 5. This is going to give us a positive and a negative value. Let's just see what effect that has. That's a little bit more what I'm looking for. So we've got this kind of textured effect across here. But it's probably a wee bit heavy. I probably want less green here for the look that I'm going for. So I'm going to bring this down to say 100. And we'll see what that looks like. Okay, that's kind of what I'm after. So I've got this nice kind of dappled, textured effect, looking like something burning or something in the smoke blowing in the breeze, if you like. Okay, so the final thing that we should do with any program is, once we've finished making it and kind of thinking as we go, is tidy it up. So I'll put these variables, these global variables for the x and the y position up at the top, take out some white space, just go through and make sure everything makes sense. So we've got void setup, which is our main function, tell it what size it is. We want to draw a grid, and then we want to draw some kind of trail. We're not doing anything in the draw function this week because we don't want it to be animated. We want to be using our own loops to get the effects we want. So let's have a look. We're going to the grid function, we tell it we don't want a stroke. We use a nested loop to draw a grid, and we decide what the fill colour is at random. We also call a function from here called random triangle, which is responsible for turning some of these squares into a pair of triangles. And random triangle turns not very many, 1 in 20 of our squares into a triangle, changing the fill colour so we can tell the difference. The triangle function, which is a built-in function, expects 3 points for each of its corners or vertices. Okay, so then we step back from there into here, and then from there back up to here. So that's the grid done all its work. That gives us the background. Now let's have a look at the trail function, which was just written. Again, we don't want a stroke here. We want a bluey-green fill, and we're using opacity to kind of build up layers of colour to get some texture. We're using a for loop, and we're going to use, this is going to iterate 100 times the width. So we set up our variable I. We see if I is less than width times 100, and then we increment I each time this iterates. If we're using a couple of variables x and y, which are global variables, and we need to just make sure we're maintaining the bounds of these. Every time x has gone all the way from 0, which is where it starts, up to width plus 1, we want to bring it back over here. So you can think of it like an old-fashioned typewriter. We're working our way across. X is now equal to width plus 1, so we take that back to 0. And at that point, we want to initialize the y value again. Whenever this is iterating, we're drawing an ellipse at the x position and then incrementing it with the unidirectional incrementer, and we're incrementing y by a random value, which is going to effectively be plus a range from plus 5 to minus 5. The ellipse at this point is just size 10, and we could play with this to put in a bit more random if we like. So this is where the green bit's been drawn and the grid has been grid has been run by the earlier function. Okay, hopefully you've followed that and that's made some sense. But this is just one example of many possible things you could build. You can see up here random trails, which we've kind of splayed off a bit, beginning to give you more of a clue at how this is made. So post any questions or comments in the thread on YouTube below this, or tweet about stuff if you want to find out more. Thanks for listening.